Hello, and welcome back to Conquering the JavaScript Interview. Today we're going to be going beyond the basics and implementing our own versions of some methods that I've done in previous videos. After I completed the Array.join and Array.reverse methods, I realized I was one method away, String.split, from completing a meme answer I gave in one of my very first videos that got some comments from students, alumni, and on YouTube about not actually providing that answer in a real-world interview scenario. I did a string reverse solution that was rather straightforward. I said that we can take any string and reverse it very simply if we know a couple of native methods. I can say, let's just return the string parameter for this algorithm. We're going to split this string into a collection of letters. Let's go ahead and console log an example here. So we're going to call reverse string. I'm going to pass in the string value of reverse. So this starts off by breaking the array, or the string, into an array of letters. The empty string is important. We are then going to use the reverse method to reverse this array of its values. There we go. And then we're going to join it back with no separator in between into a string, and we have successfully reversed that word. Now, I mentioned in the video that if you do this as an answer in an interview, it opens up a fun dialogue set of options. If you're gamifying the situation, a new dialogue tree, where this will probably be a funny laugh or chortle or chuckle at worst. Or, honestly, that'd be like an eye roll at worst, right? Where you'd say, okay, I know. This is kind of cheesing it with these native methods. Let me show you a for loop that string concatenates it, which I had another video that showed how to do that. But today we're going to be taking this meme answer and really pumping it up. We're going to rebirth this meme and make it a real answer. So if you haven't already, I do suggest you watch my array, reverse, and join videos, as I'm going to be coding or implementing those rather quickly with not a lot of explanation. So go check those out in the previous, I think, 2 or 3 videos in this series. We will be focusing a bit more and explaining with an analogy, as it kind of needs one, how the string split method is going to work. And I'm going to put some limitations on it, because trying to code a limit on top of the separator can get kind of confusing and that's more intermediate and less beginner territory. I still want to keep this fairly beginner friendly. So that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be taking this joke answer and making it a real interview answer that really shows that you know your stuff. So get ready to buckle on in. We have talked about reverse. It just flips array elements, altering their order. It is mutative. Same thing with join. It merges array elements into a single string separated by a specific string that we give it. And we haven't talked about any string methods yet, although we have used them in previous algorithm and data structure videos. The split method slices a string into an array based on a specified separator. That is its purpose, and as you can see, is the empty string that takes each letter of the string and converts it into an array of elements. That would include spaces and punctuation and things like that, FYI. There are other tricks you can do with it, so like I said, we're going to cover only a few edge cases and ignore others for simplicity's sake. We're going to be custom implementing all of these methods, and then from there, we're going to take our meme answer and alter it to be a real answer. So, when it comes to the split method, like I said, we have a little bit to talk about and learn on this one. So, I was considering doing a whole series of just re-implement all JavaScript methods, because honestly, I'm really enjoying this. I'm getting some great practice. I'm learning quite a bit, and I'm also flexing my teaching muscles by trying to make sure that I understand it. I can console log values that make sense. I can give y'all details, examples, and analogies that help you understand what I have learned through the process here. So I'm having a blast with these, and I hope my passion does kind of come through these videos, because, well, I want y'all to be just as excited about making goofy answers. This is what we really learn for, to make goofy answers real answers, right? That's why we all learn how to code the real custom stuff here. So in terms of writing split, right, let's go ahead and start altering our prototype, even though I do recommend you don't normally do that in the real world. As always, this is for interview/technical purposes only. We're going to take the string object. Now, this one's going to be a little bit different. These strings are primitive data types, where we have been only working with arrays, which are referential data types. We're going to notice a little key difference when I do a console log here in just a moment. So we're going to be taking the split method and writing our own version of it. We're going to be assigning a new function that will be invoked whenever we chain on to a string value, whether it's a variable or a string literal. Now, For example, this is what I mean here. Let's go ahead and run a string such as reverse.customSplit. If I simply invoke this function, and all this thing does is console log the keyword this. There is a bit of a difference compared to what we were dealing with inside of our array prototypes. Now, this primitive, we can see here, look what it returns here. That is not a value you would expect to see over and this is not just my my like environment specific, because I forgot about this whole aspect of modifying prototypes and things like that, and what the keyword this refers to when it comes to primitives. I tested it in Chrome browser, Firefox, and things like that in their console, thinking I had just gone crazy. But no, I forgot this is how JavaScript will handle certain things, such as this value. So what's going to happen here is when we call it on a string literal, whether it's like, this right here, or on a variable that represents a string or something like that, it automatically gets converted to the string object and not the primitive string value. That is why we're not seeing the keyword or the string value reverse being logged. It is the string object, right? This automatic conversion from JavaScript is how it internally handles primitive types when methods are called on them. So if I want to actually reference or return the string itself, we can either call the string right here and just pass in the keyword this. Look at the difference. There's the actual string now. Or we could always just do a call to this dot to string. We'll also make sure to convert it to a string. We see that log there. So again, this is how JavaScript will internally handle primitive types when methods are called on them. It converted it to the object form and not the literal string form. So that's something to keep in mind about the keyword this, but as we can see, it still gets its context from the thing furthest to the left, which happens to be that string right there. But because it's a primitive value, it's handled a little bit differently inside of these functions that are going to be on these as methods right here. Okay, so like I had said, we need to handle a couple of things here. Just like our join method we worked on a few videos ago, this is going to take a separator as its argument. And unlike the, well, technically it does have like a default, but if we don't pass a parameter, just like in join, it defaulted to a comma, that's not gonna be the case here, but we are gonna go ahead and write some edge cases to make sure we handle those situations. So we're gonna say that if the separator is null or undefined, like it's always like a really good edge case scenario to think about when you're inside these kind of interview technical questions, even though this is a meme being transformed to a real answer. If you don't provide it here, what ends up happening is it just returns the string put into an array here. So this is what we're mimicking here. Console log, let's go ahead and take this custom split. We're going to do two versions of it so we can compare as we go along here. Reverse, and then there's the regular split version. So as of right now, it shouldn't log anything, which is fine, but the bottom one should log, and the bottom one logs, as you can see, the string simply put into an array, which is why we're going to do the following. Now, remember what I showed y'all a moment ago. The keyword this refers to the string object and not the literal. So we're going to get this goofy looking answer. Our first console log is the string object value reverse inside of that object, or inside of that array, which is an object, whatever. So what we need to do is, like I showed y'all, we can just keep it simple and call the toString function on it right there, or method, and call it a day. You can also just pass it into that string, that capital S string constructor right there. So yeah, we can mimic that response right there by simply invoking this method on the context of this, and that's what ends up happening there. So that's why I had to show you all that earlier. Next is what happens when we pass split an empty string. This is considered a falsy value, so you have to be careful on your shorthand operations when it comes to evaluating, because remember, empty strings are considered falsy, so you can't put it somewhere inside an if statement without writing it explicitly. So what it does is it blows out the string, including any spaces inside of there, because spaces are important in JavaScript, right? Oop, I should do the bottom one, not that one. My bad, y'all. I was like, that doesn't seem right. There we go. So there are the spaces that it kept intact on splitting this string into an array of elements, because again, blank spaces still take up some space in memory that have to be accounted for. So we're going to say this is our other edge case. If the separator is specifically an empty string, so again, we can't do any kind of shorthand unless you just do not empty or something like that, but this is a much cleaner way of writing this instead of doing knowing this evaluates to falsy and doing the opposite of falsy. We're going to say return an array with each letter of the string value brought out. And this spread operator will be fine. It will take it and actually take that string object and spread out the literal letters to get what we are expecting. So if I pass an empty string over into this reverse now, we see that we have corrected the issue and it now successfully breaks apart a string into an array of individual letters as the elements of the array. Now, for the purpose of this video, we have covered enough of CustomSplit to get the job done. But an interviewer may, like I said, the whole point is to take what someone dubbed as a meme answer and making it a real answer. So while this is enough to get the job done, we're actually going to code out the rest of CustomSplit here to make sure we actually write out code that would work, right? So I want to make sure that CustomSplit can do almost everything that Split does in a simple fashion. So what we're going to do is now we have to actually worry about how to split a string into an array of elements where we specify a separator. So what we're going to do is clearly we're going to have a resulting array and we're going to have to return that array after these checks and conditions, operations, iterations, whatever are done. We need to know where do we start in our string to start looping here, because we're going to be looping an undetermined amount of times because it could be one, many, or none times depending on what our separator is. If our separator doesn't exist inside of the string, for example, a comma, it doesn't need to iterate at all. But nevertheless, it needs to start at the beginning of the string and start to try and search for the first instance of that separator. So if I say, hey, separate on the comma, inside of that string, what happens? Let's take a look at the output really quick. Okay, so we can see it's split around the comma. Again, this could be a semicolon. It could be anything. It doesn't really matter, right? It splits around that separator and does not include that separator in the output. So rev is the first element, ers is the second element, and that's what the solution is, right? So we're going to start at the beginning of the string and work our way down in index positions until we find our separator. So we're going to say, let our start index be 0, the beginning of the string. And then we have to know how far to traverse to find our checkpoint, if you will, and the analogy I'll be using here in just a moment. So we're going to say the index we're going to be going until is the string's first index of the separator, this many positions, from this many positions. There we go. So yeah, that's our index, our checkpoint we're going to be traversing to. We got to find the index of where our separator is inside of our string value, right? So that's what we're going to be rocking right here. So, and I said, specifically the keyword I use when describing the iteration process is we're now going to have to iterate over how many times we can find elements that are separated by our found separator and simply increment that many times. So if I have that separator in 2 positions here, look at the output, we get rev, as the 3 elements around that separator. So that seems like, well, 3 or at least 2 iterations right there until it can't find any more. So we don't know, if we're passing in any kind of string, we don't know how many times that separator might appear. So rather than running a traditional for loop, we will be using a while loop. And as we know, while loops are fantastic solutions for an undetermined number of iterations. So we're going to say, so long as it can no longer find that separator. So when it runs out of semicolons as a separator, index of will return -1. So we're going to say, so long as the separator still exists. So this will also be skipped in its entirety if the index right here comes back as -1. If it's like, hey, I can't find that separator anywhere in the string, then there's no point in iterating over it. But regardless of what happens, let's say the case that there is no separator. So if I say, if there are semicolons here and I accidentally do a comma or something else like that, look at the answer. Again, it just crams a string inside of there. That's what yeah. That's interesting. I didn't expect that to be the answer of it cramming it into an array like that, because the result should be an empty string. Or an empty array like that, which is what I was expecting to see. Yes. Oh, because I didn't do it on custom split. I did it on the regular split down here. I was like, that's peculiar. It shouldn't do that because I haven't coded it to do that yet. So yeah, what I meant to say and show was, there we go. We return the result here, which is what my custom split does. I was losing my mind going, oh, I don't want to have to edit this video because I made a huge mistake or I missed something obvious here. I misunderstood something. Split, I'm not coding split. It's already coded. So it did exactly what it should do, whereas mine doesn't do that yet. So like I said, if it can't find that separator in the keyword, or the string rather, then it will result in a -1, which means there's nothing to iterate through. But I still have to push that thing into my result. Meaning, what we're going to be writing now is saying, hey, result, which is an array, I want to push in the substring value starting at start index and up till the separator, but because we don't have to worry about that, then it doesn't matter. So we're going to say, take the starting position up to the first separator and push that in, and that's all that's going to happen. So there we go. So again, if it also had the same semicolons I had placed in mine, we can see that now we mimic that response right there, right? So like I said, that captures the remaining substring, but in this case, the remaining substring is the entire string itself, right? So after our last checkpoint, the remaining part of our road, and the analogy I'm going to throw out here in a moment, I should have thrown that out earlier, it's going to be from the substring from the last separator of the whole series, or the whole string, if there is no separator, and it's going to add that to the result. So there is no separator, which means just take the whole substring and cram it in the result and return that value. So now, what are we actually going to write for our while loop? So if it finds a separator, so if we actually switch it on both of these cases to a semicolon, it should find something to do, and I can't save this because once I do this, will be an infinite loop because it'll keep finding the separator and not actually stop the loop. But because it can now find a separator, it has to do a few things. So like I said, I was going to throw out an array or an example of an analogy to try and tell you all what we're doing here. So I should have done this a little bit earlier, but alas, what are you going to do? So imagine our string, reverse with those semicolons, as a long road, and the separator, aka our semicolon, as checkpoints along the road. So the while loop, again, on determined number of iterations, is like driving along the road and stopping at each checkpoint, aka a separator. And that does not equal -1, means we're going to continue to the end of the road because we know there are no more checkpoints. So basically keep driving until we're out of checkpoints. So it's going to stop at the final checkpoint. So as it stops at each checkpoint, aka each semicolon, so it starts at the R, drives over the E, the V, stops at the first checkpoint, okay? The section of the road, which is the substring of the string, between the start and the checkpoint needs to get added to the array. So that's what we're going to be writing next here. What we're going to write is result.push, if I can type, push, the beginning of where we started and up to and not including our checkpoint. Because remember, if I run the actual split and not my custom one, the checkpoint is not included in the array. It is skipped. So what we're going to say is result.push into that array, the substring from the separator and from the start index, right? So, yeah. So basically starting at our separator and ending at our index. So that has the reverse value right here of substring. We're doing like not from like start to end, but our end and start will be the reverse values, right? So up to our separator and our start index as the starting position. So this will take the REV and push it into the resulting array. Next, we need to move our start position from 0, the R, to the E. So what we're going to do is take our start index and reassign it a value of index plus separator.length. Okay? So start index and separator length. So basically, this is updating the start index to the position right after the current checkpoint. So in the case of our goofy little string right down yonder, it is saying, okay, this is the checkpoint, so the new start index will be here, and it's going to move on and continue the driving from there, right? So like then the loop looks for the next checkpoint, which is the separator, and that will be starting from the new index. So what we're going to say is we need to reassign our index or our checkpoint flag to where the next one is going to be before we continue driving. So we're going to do another this.index of. And just like up here, I could just copy and paste this code. All I got to do is just, we'll rewrite it though. Starting from the separator, or going to the next separator from this new starting point. So basically the E up until this semicolon before the S. That is the next checkpoint. That checkpoint is found, therefore it is not -1. That means the loop will continue. Then it will traverse the E and the R and push those on up because it found the next checkpoint. Then the start index gets moved up to the S. Then this reports that it cannot find another semicolon, which means this will result in -1. And the start index, because it got updated to S and it goes to no defined position, which means the end of the string, it pushes in the S and the E, and then we have our result, which means we have it done here. So once again, because this one I realized I broke up too many times, TLDR. The string is the road, the separator is the checkpoints. Let me scroll down. There. And those semicolons are the checkpoints. The while loop is going to be driving along the road, stopping at each checkpoint, aka the separator. At each checkpoint, the section of the road, which is a substring, between the start and the checkpoint is added to the result. Then we update the start index to be after the checkpoint. And then the loop tries to find, if there is one, the next checkpoint. That's line 33 in this example right now. Index equals this index of. It tries to find the next checkpoint starting from our new start index, right? Then it will continue until there are no more checkpoints, and whatever stretch of road is left, aka the final S and E, after that second semicolon, aka checkpoint, aka separator, it simply pushes that into the result there. And voila, that captures the remaining substring, and we should be given our final return result. So if I comment this back in, we have bungled something on up, haven't we? I have some math wrong somewhere. So let's see. We have separator. Start index is index plus separator length. The resulting substring is wrong. I reversed that logic, didn't I? Because it should be the start index up to our checkpoint index. I don't know why I tried to logic it backwards here. There we go. Sorry about that, folks. I'm not going to edit the video because, like I like to tell y'all, I make mistakes too, even though I rehearse this. I write the script, I write the code out. Trying to talk and code at the same time is difficult, but nevertheless fun. We all make mistakes, what can I say? So yeah, even though I thought maybe I could provide negative values to go backwards, I actually need to provide them. It's not smart enough to realize a start and an end that don't match that way. So yeah, the start should have been the start index, and it ends at the checkpoint index, which is what this value represents, and that should have been the substring of the road, aka the REV, is what's pushed in as a substring. So if you call that out when I first tried to reason it out, I like how I wrote it correctly. My brain clearly said something was wrong, but I tried to reason my way through it as if it was correct. And rather than stopping and admitting I was probably wrong, I just went with it anyway, and then I found the value was wrong, and that's what let me correct it. So yeah. Get in the comments if you saw it and you were like, that doesn't make sense, or my test doesn't work, or if you pause the video and you went and commented, hey, this isn't working when you wrote that, and then you've unpaused and gotten this far. Sorry, I make mistakes too. Okay. Yeah, so that is our custom split now actually coded to be functional with some parameters we can pass it, even though, like I had said, when we had gotten this far, it was enough technically to answer our question here. So next thing we need to do is write out what is after splits. We need to now write out our reverse. So we've done this before. Let's continue. We're going to write Array.prototype.customReverse. We have done this one in a previous video, so I'm not going to be doing a whole lot of explaining. No parameter required. Our start will be at the beginning. Our end will be, surprise, at the ending index of the array, which is the length -1. We will loop until starting 2 pointers at the beginning and the end, and simply in-place swap each element until we reach the middle. This is done as long as the start isn't the same or moved over the end. We are moving 2 pointers inwards until we meet in the middle. We're going to copy one of our values. We're going to pick the start. Now that we have that on copy, we can then swap. What is at the start is what's currently at the end. And then what's at the end will be what we copied into temporary, since we just overwrote it on here, this line 44. After that, we increment the start, decrement the end, and then simply because this is a mutative in place, we return the array itself after it's been reversed. So, well, let's see if it works, right? If I chain on dot reverse onto this array, that's what we see. If I chain on custom reverse, we get the same answer. Okay, so there we go. Now we need to rejoin the array back into a string. So what we're going to do is Array.prototype.customJoin. I don't know why I keep writing that. Is a function. If we don't provide a separator, we're going to say it's going to default to a comma. That is just the specifications of how the array join works. Our result in this case will be a string that after we are done, we're going to simply return our string. We're going to loop through this string and say let I equal 0 for each element. As long as we have something to the array to traverse through, move the index position up by 1 each time. Once we are past our first iteration, aka once I is greater than 0, we simply need to concatenate our separator onto each line, but not the final one. And then we're going to take our result and add our element. Right, the element in between each separator, right? Because this will add each separator after the first iteration. So the first iteration, this will be skipped. It'll add the element that we are joining to a string. Then after that, it'll keep adding the separator, then the element, then the separator, then the element, etc. until it's out. But in the case that this is null or undefined, we should probably think about that. So we're going to say, if it's null or undefined, then we add an empty string. That is the specs of join that I talked more about in the previous video. Otherwise, we add the element itself. So a little extra edge case scenario right there. So if I add custom join to the top one, join to the bottom one with an empty string, that means the separator is no separator. It's an empty string in between them all, and it should reverse them. Now, because I split these with semicolons, there are no semicolons in a normal word like that. So if we simply call with empty strings, we get our own version of reverse, which means now I can come up back yonder. And instead of doing that, we can just come down here and copy and paste the custom one, make my life easy. And reverse string mango. And I realize it's not console logging anything. Console log reverse string mango and massive error. I think probably because these probably aren't hoisted or anything like that. So, oops. I didn't see what the error was. Yeah, it's not a function, so I do have to do it down below. I don't know if any kind of weird hoisting rules would have worked or not. So, yeah, there we go. Yeah, mango is Ognam, which is correct. I think I had like other examples, like Hungry Box should be Zabrig. No, yeah, so it's reversing. Yeah, there we go. So make sure they are written above where you need to modify them. That makes sense. I don't know why I did it that way. I thought maybe because it was housed inside of a function call, it might be different. But alas, it wasn't. So yeah, there you go. We have now taken the fun legendary meme answer that got me some hate and converted it into a actual answer. So if you did this in an interview, you would look pretty ballin', if I do say so myself. If you did this when I was interviewing you, then I would hire you right away, because if you knew how to take a meme answer and expand it out into an actual answer, I mean, you got your chops. You got some serious chops right there. So, while it does provide these methods out of the box, understanding their inner workings like we've been learning through my Array Architects mini-series can deepen your JavaScript understanding and knowledge and just usage, right? It's a great way to showcase them skills in an interview. It shows that you're not just using methods, but you understand how they work under the hood. So thanks for this deep dive on how to rebirth a meme from nothing. We took a meme answer and made it a real answer, and that is what programmer humor is all about. So we have flipped and flopped our way through all this. We've got there. I made some mistakes along the way, and I like to own up to them. So if you enjoyed this session and learned something new and you want other meme answers turned into real answers, I'm always down to make these kinds of videos. Don't forget to do all the YouTube stuff. Hit the like button, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications for our uploads. I try and upload regularly on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays. My coworker, Matt, check out his videos too. He typically uploads on Friday, and he has a lot more practical hands-on stuff for building apps and cool usage of libraries and things like that. So check out his videos on Fridays. And yeah, happy coding, and I'll see y'all in the next video.